Hello again and welcome to Pick Yourself, the podcast that helps you build a meaningful electronic music career. If your goal is to create and release outstanding music on respected labels, get better bookings and grow a tribe of true fans instead of just social followers, then this show is for you. My name is Philip, thanks for tuning in, and now let's get right into today's episode. Welcome to episode 30 of Pick Yourself. This is an anniversary episode, but unfortunately we cannot celebrate because these are crazy times right now. The coronavirus has turned into a global pandemic, and this has been a really tough period already for artists, for music creators, for creatives in general, and for small businesses. And therefore, I've decided to skip my original episode that I had planned for episode 30 because I felt the need to support people a little bit here. So this episode is there for you. It's supposed to help you think about the future. It's supposed to help you cope with whatever crisis might come next. So even if things look really dark right now for you, please remember that you're not alone in this. I'm here to help you. A lot of other great people are here to help you and to support each other. And if you feel like you need a little bit of social exchange in these strange times of social distancing, then just go to pickyourselfpodcast.com/community because that will forward you to our private Facebook group. And already a lot of people are in a discussion there. They try to help each other. And I think it would be great to have you there as well. So go over there and I will obviously do my best to support you as well. If you are now trapped at home in social distance and quarantine, you maybe have a little bit more time to spare than usual, and you can use this time productively. You can create new music, obviously, but you can also try to work on your artist career because this crisis is going to end at one point, and you better prepare for the next phase of growth then. I have put together a free guide that you can download. It's called The 7 Strategies of Highly Successful Electronic Music Artists. And this is available for free. Just go to pickyourselfpodcast.com/free. And it's a compilation of the best techniques that have worked for my most successful studio clients. And I think they will also work for you. So check that out, pickyourselfpodcast.com/free, and use your time wisely now. So I wish you the best of health now, and let's jump together into this week's episode topic. And that is how to survive any crisis as an artist. So this current coronavirus pandemic is just one of many horror scenarios. And you will have to overcome many crises as an artist. This is not going to be the last one. It's probably one of the hardest ones, I admit, but it's not going to be the last one. And I want to give you some tips on how to prepare for these scenarios and also how to come out stronger on the other end. So let's just start with this current crisis. Let me take that as an example and show you what that actually means. What does this crisis mean for artists and the music industry in general? So overall, I don't have to tell you that this is a massive existential threat to artists, to music producers, but also to other businesses in the music industry that are related to that income from artists. And the problem overall here is that we've become incredibly dependent on one source of income, and that's the income from live events. So most artists who make a full-time living right now in the music industry can only do so because they get paid for gigs that they play in front of a live audience. Whether that's a live show, whether that's a DJ set, it still means you have to be physically at one place and perform something live at an event where people go. Bands and other solo artists, they also sell a lot of merchandise. This is not so much the case in the electronic music industry, but this is also super related to live shows. So a band sells way more shirts and way more hoodies and whatever they bring on their merch table at a show compared to what they sell in their online store, for example. So if it's not possible anymore to play live shows, the whole system basically collapses. And while the artists themselves are the first ones that are affected by this, it doesn't stop there. It goes on to booking agents, clubs, show promoters, live sound engineers, light engineers, and maybe even the bartenders are struggling right now that usually work at the clubs where those events are taking place. So this whole music ecosystem suffers from this. The only thing that goes up right now is music streaming. I mean, there is a lot of growth happening anyways, but right now when people are staying at home, it's actually expected to go up more than 60%, according to a recent study. But the big problem here is that streaming is not going to help you pay your rent. The payments are so little that, it's just not even close to what you can earn with live shows. And most producers, I think, will be happy if their streaming royalties at the end of the year are high enough to buy an extra roll of toilet paper. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, if you're listening back to this episode sometime in the future, you may be wondering why I'm making a joke about toilet paper. The situation is that bad that people start buying too much toilet paper so that there's no toilet paper left in the stores, which is really silly. But yeah, this is how bad it got. But to be a little bit more precise about how this affects artists in our community, let me quickly read you some examples of things that people posted in our private Facebook group. So to protect people's privacy, I will not read the names, obviously, but you can go to pickyourselfpodcast.com/community and read the originals and interact with the people there if you have some way of helping them. So one community member writes, "It's all frustrating. Cancelled shows in 3 countries and all sound engineering and stagehand jobs cancelled as well." So yeah, that's a really bad situation to be in. If you lose your income as an artist, but you also lose your income from a side job, then that's a big problem. And this member is not the only one. So others write, "No gigs and my day job was with a booking agency, where also no one has any gigs, so I basically lost my job." Yeah, so she's also in a pretty similar situation. Another member writes, "I work in live music sector, which has been turned on its head. Basically, I feel like I'm screwed." So yeah, that's a big problem as well. So people losing their jobs, but also like mentally, it's hard to cope with this situation. One of our members writes, "Yep, same as the most. Gigs cancelled, loss of income, and depression symptoms just killing all creativity. Choosing to take care of mental health through meditation, physical activity, and writing firsthand. Then we will see if I can write any new masterpieces." So yeah, if you cannot even use that time productively because that anxiety and this feeling of isolation and depression just keeps on killing your creativity, that is a really, really tough situation to be in. And I know that this episode cannot solve these problems for you. Absolutely not. This would be way above my abilities. But I hope that it at least gives you a little bit of a warm feeling, a little bit of comfort while you're listening to this. And also the feeling that you're not alone out there. It also shows you a way of coping with these things a little bit better in the future and to prepare for these types of situations. And yeah, if you have any questions on that or if I can help you directly in any way, then just reach out. I will do my best to use that time to write back to you. Yeah, either comment on the blog post for this, pickyourselfpodcast.com, and just go to this episode. Or you go to the Facebook group. I will try to answer any question. Or you hit me up with private messages through philip@kopilko-productions.com, and I try to do my best to help you in that situation. Okay, so let's take the pressure out of this a little bit and take a step back and observe it as clearly as possible. The real problem here that we're facing is our lack of preparation as creatives. So as creatives, we often tend to live in the moment. We try to enjoy ourselves, and this is all good. There's nothing wrong with that. But now in the middle of this crisis, it becomes clear that most artists and even most small businesses in general in the music industry have not been prepared at all for tough times. So let me get this straight. The crisis itself is not the problem. Our lack of preparation is the real problem. The question was never whether there would be a crisis or not. We simply didn't know when exactly it would happen and what type of crisis it would be. But honestly, did you really think that for the next 50 years we will not face any type of major crisis? I think that's unrealistic. And I also think it's unrealistic that just because Corona will be part of history at some point, that we don't have to face another crisis. It can be some type of financial crisis again. In the banking sector, they're going to screw up for sure again. Or whatever other type of crisis might await us in the future. It can be something similar, another pandemic outbreak, whatever. So this is possible, and we have to do at least the bare minimum to prepare for this situation. And since there's very little you can do while you're in such a phase, it all comes down to what you've set in place beforehand. So let's now talk about how you can, from now on, protect yourself as an artist. I believe that there are 3 pillars of security every artist should have, and I'm now going to walk you through them. The first one is financial resilience. So what does resilience mean? According to the Oxford English Dictionary, resilience is defined as the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. It's also another word for toughness. So as an artist, as a DJ or a small business in the music industry, you have to build financial resilience to survive tough times. And with tough times, I don't necessarily mean a pandemic outbreak. It could also be just the music sector itself that is declining at some point in the future. And then it's going up again and then it's declining again. So this is happening again and again, especially when new types of consumer behavior starts to happen. For example, people stopped buying CDs and they started buying digital downloads, or even did a lot of illegal downloading, which was a major problem during the late 90s, early 2000s. And the music sector was suffering a lot. So just now in the recent years, with the extraordinary rise of streaming, this is shifting now again, and the music sector as a whole is making more money than before. So financial resilience is really important to survive these big switches that are happening in your industry, but also with the whole world economy, basically. So what can you do now as an artist? Your goal should be to increase your so-called runway. Your runway just means how long can you sustain yourself even if you don't have any income. And you can easily calculate your runway. So you simply divide your cash reserves by your monthly expenses. So just as an example, if you have set aside $9,000 and your monthly expenses are around 1,500, you have a runway of 6 months, because 6 times 1,500 equals 9,000. So what is your runway right now? This is the first thing you have to know. So I'm going to walk you now through 4 steps that will help you build financial resilience as an artist. But first of all, a short disclaimer. I'm no financial advisor, obviously, and this is not financial advice. I'm only sharing my personal opinion and experience here. That's it for the legal stuff. Now let's move on to the suggestions here. Number 1, start tracking your monthly spendings. And it doesn't matter how you do it, it's just important that you do it. So some people prefer doing it the old school way, collecting receipts and entering them with pen and paper, and then at the end of the month looking back at this. And other people prefer to use something modern, like either their own spreadsheet or an app like YNAB. You need a budget, YNAB. So this is something that integrates directly with your bank account and gives you a great overview already and automatically. So depending on the type of person you are, go for what feels natural to you. But the most important thing is do it. Start tracking your monthly spending so you have an idea. The second step is you have to know your business expenses, but also your private ones, and create some kind of worst case scenario of the realistic minimum you need to invest per month. So if you're a vinyl addict and you're running your DJ, artist, whatever career as a business, as a small business, besides day job or without a day job, whatever, you have to think about, like, is this really still the time to invest $40 for that rare vinyl thing that you crave to have? Or is this something that is not part of your realistic minimum you need to invest per month? So make these tough decisions right now and see what is this realistic minimum. This is a really important number that you need to know. And then in step 3, you can calculate how much money you need to stay afloat as a business, but also personally, for at least 6 months without income. If you want to be safe, go for 12 months. So if your private expenses are around, let's say, $1,500 and your business expenses are also around $1,500 per month, this is your realistic minimum, then it means you need $3,000 per month of income to stay afloat. And you can multiply this by 6, and then you know, like, what is your runway number, your minimum runway number that you need to achieve. And if you want to be super safe, go for 12 months. So if you follow step 1, step 2, step 3, then you have this number, your minimum runway number that you need. So let's say this is whatever, $15,000. Then in step 4, you can start creating a so-called emergency fund on a separate bank account or on a virtual sub-account. And you start initiating an automatic bank transfer that starts adding money to your emergency fund automatically at the beginning of every month until you've reached that investment goal. So modern bank accounts, like for example N26 is something that's really popular here, make it very easy to create these sub-accounts. It's also free to do this and set up automatic transfers. So every month there's an automatic system in place that helps put money into this emergency fund until it's completely populated with money. And what's super important here is you have to automate this process, and you have to deduct a certain part of your income right at the beginning of every month. If you try to do this manually, at some point during the month you will either forget about it or you will have already spent the money. So treat this exactly like your fixed expenses, like rent, like electricity, or whatever else you have to pay monthly. The number one mistake I see people make is they say, okay, I have this amount of income, and at the end of the month I see what's left, and this is the thing that I can set aside. This is just not working. You have to trick your brain. You have to deduct it at the beginning of the month. Otherwise, it just won't work. You will spend that money no matter what. Yeah. So obviously, if you are right now in a super stressed financial situation because you are in the crisis already, this is not working. Yeah. So you should not populate your emergency fund right now if you have no income. Obviously, that's bullshit. Yeah. You have to use whatever you make right now, you have to use that to just survive basically during the crisis. But in healthy economic times where you have some income, this is absolutely crucial. Have a fixed thing that gets deducted and put into your emergency fund. And the number one excuse that I hear from people is, oh, well, I earn so little, I cannot set aside anything. Yeah, and the only thing I can say here is you don't have an option. So there's no other option. You just have to have this emergency fund. Otherwise, you're completely screwed in whatever crisis comes next. So even if it's just a little bit that you can set aside, I'm sure that there will be a possibility to set aside $20, $50, and maybe a little bit more, and increase that amount year after year because the income usually also goes up a little bit. And then I know from some podcast listeners that they are quite heavily in debt in student loan or whatever it is. For these type of situations, I'm definitely no expert on how to deal with this, but there is a way to educate yourself. Listen to podcasts by Dave Ramsey, for example, Dave Ramsey Show. It's a really popular figure in the personal finance scene. And these people talk about things like how to deal with debt, how to increase that emergency fund, and how to also then invest for your retirement after that. So make sure you start to educate yourself on these types of things. And especially if you're the type of person that says, I'm really bad at dealing with money, oh hell, should you listen to these types of shows and educate yourself. This is so important. This is one of the most important aspects of your life. So please make sure you don't avoid this area completely. Try to get better at it. And I promise you, you will feel more relaxed about your future simply because you take ownership of this area and you gain some control over what's happening on that side of your life. So one last side note on this whole financial resilience thing and emergency fund. This is really important. Pay close attention. Your emergency fund is not your retirement account. This is super important because people sometimes mix this up and this is a problem. So there are three types of investments: short-term investments, long-term investments, and saving for your emergency fund. And these are three different categories. It's really dangerous to put them in the same category and just, set aside money for all of that together. You need to separate them because they're meant to achieve different things by using different investment methods. Yeah. So investing in your retirement account, for example, is a super long-term strategy. So here it's not important to have easy access to your money from one day to the next because it's meant to help you someday in the future. You're looking at a time frame of 20 to 50 years, depending on how old you are right now. Yeah. So with short-term investments to fulfill little dreams like new furniture, a new car, or even a pet, whatever it is, this requires a different strategy. You need a little bit more easy access to cash, but also it's not important to have it on the next day. Yeah. So therefore, different investment methods apply. And your emergency fund is something completely different. Here, the only and absolutely most important thing is easy access to cash. Yeah. And therefore, you shouldn't invest it at all. It doesn't matter where. You just don't invest that. You just set it aside on a very traditional, normal bank account, like a checkings account. And you just make sure that this money is available on the next day latest. Even better if it's immediately available, because this crisis, whatever the next crisis is, it will come suddenly. It will come without preparation. And therefore, it's important to keep that money as easily accessible as possible. Just don't use your mattress, please. So that was my first pillar, the financial resilience. Let's now move on to the second one, and that is psychological resilience. So if you want to survive a crisis as an artist, you need to watch out for your mental health. And the topic of mental health is so difficult, especially in the music industry, that I will definitely do a dedicated episode on that, and I will interview an expert on the topic, because I'm no therapist, I'm no psychologist, and it just makes much more sense to interview someone who is really, really solid in that field. I have only my own experiences with things like therapy, and therefore I really empathize with the people who have a hard time right now during that crisis, an especially hard time. And therefore, let me just mention quickly what that concept of psychological resilience is. So, the American Psychological Association defines psychological resilience as follows. It is the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress, such as family and relationship problems, serious health problems, or workplace and financial stressors. As much as resilience involves bouncing back from these difficult experiences, it can also involve profound personal growth. So that was the definition of psychological resilience, and I find it beautiful that it also includes that second component of growth, so that you can build something out of a crisis, and walk out of it stronger, basically. Now, you might think that you're either born with psychological resilience or not. And indeed, some people have a harder time with this than others, but the good news is that you can also build that muscle of resilience over time. So there are several things you can do to increase your psychological resilience as an artist, and that is mostly investing in personal relationships, practicing mindfulness techniques like meditation, finding purpose by giving something meaningful to others, and focusing generally on a positive outlook even in bad situations. And I know that all sounds easier said than done, but there are some things you can actually do in a situation like this. So let's take the current crisis as an example. So in this current crisis, I can already say that it impacts my studio business severely. My income heavily relies on people hiring me for mixing and mastering services, and it's quite simple. When artists don't play shows, they get less money, and therefore they have less disposable income to invest in my services. It's a really simple equation. So what do? Do I give up and complain about the circumstances? Well, of course not. Hell no. I decided to focus on giving even more to my community of podcast listeners and also to my clients. I tried to do as much coaching as possible. I tried to give as much advice as possible right now, because this gives me a sense of purpose in dark times. And I feel a lot of positive energy thanks to this. And maybe this inspires you to also think about what can you give to other people, which then helps you also feel better. So the act of giving always has a little bit of a selfish component to it, and that's completely okay. So whether that is like supporting people directly in your neighborhood, or whether that is joining, for example, whatever private Facebook group of artists that have an exchange. It doesn't have to be ours here. It can also be whatever other group or forum or whatever. Try to support other people and you will notice that it already feels better. And one of the points was investing in personal relationships. I know that this is difficult right now when social distancing is the word of the day. But yeah, it's still possible. Give old friends a call. Try to call family members. You don't have to be physically in the same space. Tools like Skype or Zoom or Google Hangouts or Google Meet or whatever it's called. These are tools that help you maintain some kind of personal connection still, even if you're not physically in the same room. I know that it's different. It's not the same thing, but you can still invest in these personal relationships right now. This is absolutely possible. And if you haven't tried out any type of mindfulness technique, like for example meditation yet, this is probably a good time to start with this and to just experiment if it does something for you or not. So there is no black and white, but I think it's difficult to say, this is just not working for me if you haven't tried it. I think it's a very good moment to try things like this out. There's a super cool free app that's called Headspace. There's another app called Calm, and there's endless YouTube guided meditations or meditative music on Spotify that you can just check out and simply close your eyes and breathe a little bit and focus on nothing but breathing. Yeah. This is something that is relatively easy to just give a try right now. Yeah. And it might help you increase your psychological resilience. And this is also like a short-term benefit. It can already help you in this current crisis. Okay, so we had 2 pillars of security already. The first one was financial resilience. The second one was psychological resilience. Now let's come to the third one, and that is multiple sources of income. So having to rely on only one source of income in the music business is extremely dangerous, as we see right now. Yeah. If you're used to making a living by playing shows and DJ gigs, you're having a hard time right now. So what do you have to do as an artist? Well, you need to diversify your income a little bit. And there are enough other sources to make money apart from playing live shows. And I'm just going to name a few of them. There is licensing your music for films and games. That is called sync licensing. And this can actually create a lot of additional revenue. Giving classes and workshops. And this also works online. So if you are really good at something, try to teach and try to monetize your teaching abilities. You can also start writing articles for music magazines or blogs. And even if this is not like a huge extra income, it still means you are a little bit more diversified. And you can also build a certain skill that you can monetize it in different ways then. You can also create sample packs, for example, and sell them online, or preset patches for certain synths, or tutorial videos and sell them behind some kind of paywall, or use something like Patreon to have people support you for the content that you put out. So be creative. This is not a full list, so there's way more than that. And the only thing that I want to say here is most people are just too lazy to think of that diversification. Yeah. And just to give you a personal example, in my studio business, I also had to prepare for change. Yeah. I've noticed that a lot of artists are super interested in growing their skills rapidly. And I also noticed that online tutorials can only teach you so much and often also teach like wrong concepts or don't explain concepts in full depth. Yeah. So I've started offering one-on-one coaching sessions besides my usual mixing and mastering work. And this diversification now helps me stabilize my income. Because guess what? If people stay at home right now during the corona crisis, they're probably still interested in learning new techniques, in growing, or just want to discuss their artist career with me. Yeah. So even if that mixing and mastering income drops a little bit during that phase, I'm pretty sure that this coaching thing goes up because people have just more time to invest in that. So make sure you think about additional sources of income and try to be creative, try to find something that works for you and diversify a little bit. It's so important to not rely only on playing live shows and selling a couple of vinyls here and there or gaining a little bit of streaming royalties. So this is not going to be enough in the future. Okay, so these were my 3 pillars of security that will help you deal with the crisis. The first one was financial resilience. The second one was psychological resilience. And the third one, multiple sources of income. And the problem here is these 3 pillars, they can help you deal with a future crisis, but they cannot help you really deal with the current one. So let me give you just some short-term remedies for the current crisis. I know that it's not a lot, but it's probably helping you a little bit here. So the most important thing is do everything to protect your cash flow. This means, first of all, you minimize all unnecessary spendings, especially things like subscriptions and memberships and so on that are not essential to you. Then secondly, look for support in your social security system and inform yourself about the possibilities. Many countries, and even the European Union as a whole, for example, are putting together emergency funds to protect small businesses and artists from total bankruptcy. Study these options. It's so important to educate yourself on this and to act fast. If you really believe in your artist career, then even something like a short-term loan might help you survive this turbulent phase. Yeah. Now, the next thing is, even if we're all meant to practice social distancing in the current corona crisis, we obviously shouldn't stop meeting friends. We just cannot do it physically. Yeah, and some people have already argued to call the whole thing physical distancing and not social distancing. Yeah, just go back to the good old practice of giving your friends a phone call. Use online meeting software like Zoom, like Skype or Google Meet, whatever it is, and maybe even write a longer message or longer email. So back in the day, people used to send each other really long physical letters. Now, this is not the best idea right now due to infection chances and so on. But yeah, why not write a longer message or an email where you actually put something meaningful in and not just like some short random bullshit that you usually exchange. Next thing on my list here is focus on giving, because this is psychologically speaking more important than ever before. Do whatever you can to help and support others in the community. Use your talents for this, use them wisely, and simply enjoy this rewarding feeling of purpose in your life. And lastly, if you struggle with heavy anxiety due to the virus, please restrict yourself to watching or reading the news not more than once a day, because this can really make it worse. If you constantly check the news and every new horror message pops up in your news feed, that's really, really bad. And also be open to call professional hotlines where trained psychologists and therapists help you calm down again. And don't hesitate to seek help. Yeah. If some kind of therapy gets necessary, this will be possible in some way online as well. Yeah. So just don't hesitate to ask for help. Don't hesitate to reach out for professionals that will help you in this situation. And there's no reason to be ashamed of that. Yeah. You're not weak. You're not weaker than others. You're not a failure. Just do it. Yeah, it's really important to seek help when you need it. Now, to bring this home, this is definitely not the last crisis you will have to deal with as an artist. And even if this corona pandemic is considered a once in 100 years type of historic event, it's more than likely that you will have to face several other crises over the course of your music career. So you better start preparing for the worst case scenario so you don't have to panic again when times get tough. And overall, to end this positively, I'm absolutely convinced that we will overcome this pandemic, with considerable losses though, and it's our obligation to make the best out of our future afterward. So do what you have to do now, trust in science, and not in doomsday prophets or conspiracy theories. And most importantly, try to surround yourself with positive people right now. Even if you cannot meet them physically, just try to call the right people right now and stay in touch with your loved ones. This is super important. Okay, so let's put this into action. How can you overcome any future crisis as an artist? I have put together 3 action steps for you that you can take. The first one is calculate your current runway and set up an emergency fund as soon as possible. So keep in mind that you can only do this when you have more disposable income than what you're currently spending. So if this crisis has already caused a heavy financial hit, then you may have to postpone this step a little bit for a more stable phase. And also just make sure that you use a traditional bank account that is easily accessible and low cost. That's the only important thing here. Second action step, start investing in your psychological resilience. So start with little daily rituals of, for example, sending one nice message to a close friend or family member every morning. And also see if there are any mindfulness techniques that resonate with you. This can dramatically help you build up this resilience and also makes you react differently to stress in general. And the third action step is explore which other sources of income you can incorporate in your music career in the future. So from sync licensing to selling sample packs and so on, there are way more options for you than you think. And even if many of the suggestions that I've made before don't sound realistic to you, then this is maybe just because you're underestimating yourself and your capabilities. So at least give it a try and see what happens. Yeah, you will be surprised, I think. So that is it for this episode. I hope you got something out of this, and I hope you and your loved ones stay healthy. Please follow the instructions of professionals in the health sector and do what you can to overcome this crisis. Together, I think we will make this happen, and hopefully with as little damage as possible. I would like to hear from you now. Are you directly affected by the corona crisis in regards to your artist career? If so, in which way? And also, what are you doing to mitigate the negative effects right now? just leave a comment on the blog post at pickyourselfpodcast.com or join our Facebook community, pickyourselfpodcast.com/community. I would love to see you there. I would love to be able to help you. Until then, I would say stay healthy. Bye-bye. If you don't want to miss any of the upcoming episodes, please make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app. And you can find detailed blog posts for every single episode on pickyourselfpodcast.com. Until then, see you next time.